It can be hard to get our players to think outside of their character sheets sometimes. A lot of times they're looking at their character sheet, they're thinking about the mechanics of their characters, what kind of powers do they have, what kind of abilities they have in combat, what kind of bonuses they have when they're attacking with their weapon. And ideally, we want to try to get the players to think more about what's going on in the fiction of the game. I have a simple trick that I've been using now for a while, which is anytime a character damages a monster, the first time they damage that monster, I like to ask them to describe an interesting physical characteristic of that monster. It's a fun way for a player to describe something that their character is seeing in-game. Sometimes they'll come up with answers that are pretty silly, like that ghoul has a mohawk or that troll is wearing a funny hat. Sometimes these descriptions actually lead to a new direction in the story. That troll with a funny hat actually has a background for why he has that hat. And maybe the players don't decide to kill him. And now he's got useful information that they've got. And now they're going through the woods following a troll with a funny hat. But most importantly, when the players are describing the physical characteristics of these monsters, they're thinking about those monsters from the point of view of their characters. They're getting away from just the pure mechanics of combat and actually thinking about what they're seeing. There's lots of ways to get the players to actually describe this. Again, I like to do it every time a character damages a monster. I like to have them describe the physical characteristic of that monster. But you might go around the table having each of the players describe a physical characteristic of any of the number of monsters at the beginning of combat. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. You can have them take turns about describing different monsters until all of the monsters are defined. If you happen to be using the D&D Beyond Encounter Builder, or you're using monster tokens that have letters to identify those monsters, one neat trick is instead of just asking them to describe an interesting physical characteristic of that monster, instead you say, describe an interesting physical characteristic of this ghoul that starts with A. And this time they actually have to think a little bit harder and they go, maybe that ghoul has an arrow in its head, right? And you say, okay, who wants to define ghoul B? And somebody say, ooh, that ghoul has a bone sticking out of his arm. Right? Ghoul C. Oh, that ghoul has a caved-in chest. And now you've got a physical characteristic that starts with the letter of the token or the letter of the monster entry in the D&D Beyond Encounter Builder. So now you can tie Ghoul A, Ghoul B, and Ghoul C to the ghoul with the arrow in his head, the ghoul with the bone sticking out of his arm, or the ghoul with the caved-in chest. So now you have in-story descriptions that tie individual monsters to the tokens that you're using to represent them at the table. It's a cool trick, and it's a lot of fun for players to come up with something. There's a lot of laughs, a lot of jokes, and it's a great way to get them to think about the monsters that are in the world instead of just thinking about the tokens that are on the table. Asking the players to identify interesting physical characteristics of monsters is an easy way to get them to start thinking about the story of the game instead of just the mechanics. It's a trick I've been using for a long time now. I really like it, and I hope you'll give it a shot. If you like this video and you want to support the work that I do, you can do so in 4 ways. You can subscribe to me on YouTube. You can subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. You can help support me on Patreon by going to patreon.com/slyflourish, or you can pick up my book, Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master. I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a great day.